Professor Shanta is here from the University of Baltimore. And she is going to be talking to us about custody, child custody, right? The question we posed was, are you struggling with child custody issues? And this has been a topic that's come up in the organization time and time. I think over the last 4 months, Professor, we have been getting inquiries left and right from all angles, whether it's the man trying to get access to his children and is having issues with co-parenting with his, a child's mother, and he's in a different relationship and he's struggling navigating that. He wants access to his child, but he's stuck in the middle between these two women that he has to please, right? The one that he lives with, and then the one that he has a child with, right? And I know you're not here to resolve all those problems. We definitely recommend mediation and things like that. But then we have the mom, right? Who is pushing to have this man a part of her child's life, not getting a response, having to go to child support to at least get something, right? And then we got these other challenges where we have the opposite parent is bitter, right? And so they're using the child as leverage against the opposite parent, right? Then you have these situations where mom or dad lost custody because of social challenges, right? And they want to get custody back or access back to their love, they want their children back, right? They want access to their children. They birth these children for 9 months to a year, right? They're trying to figure out ways to, even though they lost some level of custody, right? One, because not understanding the family law system and being very intimidated when a child protective services comes to their door and they just really don't know what to do, right? And then there are women who, let that 18-month threshold, they're close to that 18-month threshold. When you're supposed to, if you go past that threshold, you might as well give up because, the law will, 15 months, yeah. And so we sit out for justice sits in the intersection of all of those things, right? And so one, introduce yourself, your role, kind of your background a little bit to the members both virtually and in person. Let us know what you do at the University of Baltimore, and let's get into your presentation.
Okay. Well, hi everyone. I'm Shanta. I'm going to be looking both ways so I can talk to the people in the room and talk to the people online. Hello, people online. So I'm a professor at the University of Baltimore, and I teach family law and I teach child welfare law. And I practice family law here in Baltimore as part of a legal clinic at the University of Baltimore. And before that, I used to represent parents in child welfare proceedings in Brooklyn. So I have experience in both areas. Today I'm going to talk about child custody not involving DSS. If people have questions about that, I can try. But I think we're also going to try to have someone who works at the public defender's office that does DSS cases regularly come in with me, and we'll do another one of these. So we can do more specifics about that. But if you have a question, I can do my best to answer it. So a bit about me. I'm from Trinidad. That's where I grew up. I moved here when I was a teenager. And I moved to New York, and then I moved to DC about 5 years ago. I got 2 kids myself. So these issues are really important to me because I think everybody should be able to have the relationship with their kids that I do. And I know that that's not the case because of all kinds of reasons, structural reasons, because of socioeconomic bias, because of racism, because of all kinds of barriers that we put in people's way that make it hard for them to have access to their children. And the same about people using children as leverage against each other, I think the state does that too.
Right.
And I just want to say, whatever I say here is not legal advice. I cannot give you legal advice on your specific case. I don't represent you. I also don't have malpractice insurance. So this is just an informational session. I can sort of speak in generalities about what judges look at, and what I'm going to talk about is sort of what a judge is looking for in a custody case. Okay, and if I use words that you're like, what is she talking about? Just interrupt me. Interrupt me at any point you want. And if you don't know the word, it only means that we're not speaking the same language. Like if you're a mechanic and I asked you to explain what's wrong with my car, good chance I need you to explain like 10 words to me. If I say something that you don't know, it's just because that's how lawyers make money. We speak a different language. That's it, you know?
Yeah.
And there's usually a better way for me to say it. So it's my fault if I said it in a way that you didn't understand. Okay. I actually hate using slides.
Next slide.
Yeah, I hate using slides in a meeting like this, but there's just a lot of text. I also made handouts, which you can grab with a lot of this information because I didn't expect you to remember all these things. Oh, okay, sure. Okay, so the first thing you need to understand is who is a parent, right? Because a parent who is a legal parent has the most rights to their child of any. Okay, no matter what anybody tells you, you as a parent have the most rights. So biological parents, mothers always have parental rights because it's very important to determine where a child came from their mothers. It's a little different with dads, right? So if a dad takes a DNA test, for example, and the results are more than likely, over 99%, that he's the father, he can be the father, but if he's trying to assert his custodial rights and he's never played a role in his child's life, he may not get access to that child. What he needs to do is have a significant custodial, personal, or financial relationship with the child. And what that means is that you've spent time with that child, it's time with that child, you've given money to that child, you've taken care of that child at some point in their life. And really, courts want to see that you file some people. Yeah.
So it's in the reverse, so like, it's clear that it was a child, but she had no role, you know, she had given the child mostly to the dad, maybe she didn't have it, it was like ongoing involvement with the child, but she still be like the default, like, did she be.
It's not that she's the default in terms of what kind of custody access she gets. What I'm talking about here, which thank you, it's helping me clarify, is whether the father's gonna have any rights at all, okay, to visit or to spend time with his child. They would put him on the hook for child support, which is a whole different issue. But in terms of actually having access to your child, you have to have shown some kind of interest in having that kind of relationship if you want to come back later and say, no, this is my child. With a mom, it's a little bit different because she's on the birth certificate. So we know that she's the legal parent almost always. And we'll talk about it when you use like assisted reproduction, like IVF and stuff like that. And I will talk about how dads can end up having more custody than moms in some cases. Okay, if you adopt a child, you are the parent. You are exactly as if you were a biological parent. If you sign what's called an affidavit of parentage, sometimes you get those in the hospital. So if you're not married and you are in the hospital, I'll talk about married people in a little while. If you're not married and you have a baby, and you might say, and you're presuming it's a father in the room, and he says, no, I'm the father. I want to make sure I'm on the birth certificate, etc. There's a form you can fill out. So if you filled out that form, you signed it, they'll tell you should consult with the lawyer, you should understand what that signing that paper means. But if you sign that and you don't try to undo that paper within 60 days, chances are you will continue to be the legal father. Yeah.
I got a child in
Florida.
but I never took a DNA test for her. And our man who just told me that I'm the father. And I can't go back and change none of that. And I wasn't there for the birth, none of that. I never had anything to do with it. My parents that lived down in Florida, they had it, but I hadn't. And how would I go about getting the DNA test?
I don't know what the law. Yeah. So that's a hard question because every state's laws are different. So I don't know what the law in Florida is. There is a good chance there's a way to challenge with a DNA test.
Yes.
You would have to speak to a lawyer in Florida because there's some, like in Maryland, there's a specific way to go about getting a DNA test with the courts. How old is the child? Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. Yeah, you could file something with the court asking for a DNA test, probably. Or you could see if there's free legal hotlines in every state. Probably, usually, you can find a Florida family law hotline that can try to help you. They might be able to answer that question, but I don't want to give you the wrong. Yeah. Okay. Okay. If you were in the hospital and you knew that you met this woman when she was pregnant, okay, and you knew that child is not yours, but you want to build a life as together, and you say, I don't care who's the actual father, this is going to be my child. And you sign that paper, knowing that you weren't the father, you're on the hook no matter what. Okay, if you made that decision. If, however, you were defrauded, they told you the baby was yours, or there was some mistake, you might be able to challenge it later. Okay. If you are with another person and you decide, okay, you can't get pregnant the traditional way and you want to try in vitro fertilization or artificial insemination, and you decide to have a child together, that is your child. That's true if you're in a same-sex relationship, opposite-sex relationship, the laws are gender neutral now. So whatever kind of relationship you're in, that is your child. If you are married, at the time that the woman becomes pregnant, or at the time she has the baby, the child is presumed to be yours. If you think it is not yours, you can challenge that in court. But there automatically is a presumption that a child born in a marriage or in a marriage is your child. If you're unmarried, but you pull the child out as yours, like on Facebook, you're calling them your son, or you're pushing them around the neighborhood, and there is a presumption that that's going to be your child, which you can later try to say, no, this is not my child, but there's a presumption that it's your child. Okay. If you later marry somebody who had a child and you sign one of those papers that says, I acknowledge this child is mine. If you sign any form saying that you're the parent, you're going to be the parent. Okay. There's a lot of reasons for that have worked with child support and custody. But these are the ways that you become a parent. And that's very important, like I said, because determining who is a parent is really crucial to custody. Okay. All right. If there is no custody order, if you've never been to court, you have equal rights to your child. Both parents have equal rights. So you might say, well, I've raised this child the entire time, you have no rights. That's not true. A father who shows up today or a mother who shows up today, if there is no court order, they have equal rights of access and decision making, because no judge has said otherwise. So a lot of people don't get custody orders because they say, well, the person's never around or whatever. If that person shows up and they take the child, they're legally able to do that because there's no court order saying that they cannot. And as a parent, they are able to do that, right? Because they have equal rights. If you don't want that to happen, or if there's some arrangement that you don't like, for example, one parent is withholding the child, you want to spend more time with your child, you want to make decisions, or you don't like the way that the other parent is disciplining your child or who they're hanging out with, those kinds of things. You probably need to go to agree with the other person, and if you can't agree, you need to go to court. Okay. All right. So if you do go to court, any custody proceeding, the judge is deciding what's in the best interest of the child. You probably have heard that before, right? Best interest of the child. Any determination involving children ultimately comes down to what a judge thinks is what is in the best interest of the child. What is the best interest of the child? Who knows? Okay. It is a really fact-based standard that is up to whatever judge is sitting in court that day. That is not entirely reassuring. And you can see that play out in court. Okay. Is that fair? No. Does it allow for people's biases? 100%. And people tend to think of parenting in terms of their own experience. So a judge's experience of parenting, what they saw as as they were children, or what they do as parents may be very different to someone of a different culture, religion, socioeconomic status, education level. And those judgments certainly come out. You can hear it in court sometimes. It's very subjective. And there are factors that judges are supposed to use to guide them. Okay, we'll talk about that in a second. For each factor that we'll talk about, you want to show a connection between that factor and why that's in the best interest of the child. So for example, one factor that we'll talk about is material opportunities affecting the future of the child, right? Which really sounds like if you make more money, you're going to have a better life for your child, which is just one factor. But if one parent has a lot more money than the other parent, but never spends any of that money on the child, you could argue, well, what good is their money? It's not actually affecting the future opportunities of the child, right? All that is to say that because this is subjective, because it's based on facts, you want to present the best narrative, the best story of who you are as a parent in a custody proceeding. Things that seem insignificant to you might be very significant to your child. And I always think, like, if you can leave the judge with a picture of what life is for that child in your care, and how the custody arrangement that the other person is proposing would disrupt that and be harmful to the child, you've done a good job. I sometimes literally ask people, from the time you wake up to the time you go to sleep, tell me what you do with your child. What's their favorite book? What's their favorite food? What will they never eat? You know, what makes them really upset? What do they like to do? What do you do when they're upset? Little things that only you know, because you know your child best, right? And those are the kinds of things people think are not important because they're not legal, but those are really what make the difference, right? Because as I said, it's all subjective. It's all based on. All right, so how do judges decide what's in the best interest of the child? We have these factors, they're from a case. And the way that lawyers would do it is they would go into court and say, and you can do this too, is say, you know what, I think these 3 factors suggest that I am the better person. For example, number 4, potentiality of maintaining natural family relations. What that really means is this child going to have access to other people that are important? Grandparents, cousins, aunts, uncles. If you every Sunday have a big dinner with your family, or you guys all go to church, or, you know, and that's the kind of family situation you're exposing your child to, that's huge, right? If your child has asthma and the other parent smokes, right? When we're thinking about the health of the child, that's something in your favor. Okay. So I'll go through them a little bit just to explain what they mean. So fitness really means how capable of a parent you are. And fitness can mean a lot of things, honestly. And there are factors to determine what actual unfitness means, which I'll talk about in a second. But it can include things like whether you use substances, you know, whether how much time you spend with the child, how much time you spend away from the child, everything from like do you work long hours, those kinds of things, right? And what I should have said before this is there's no one factor that's determinative. So if you think like, oh, I have something that I feel like is really bad on one of these, it's just one factor, right? And I'm sure you have other things, right? That you want to pick what are your strongest arguments. The character and reputation of the parties is exactly what it sounds like, right? What people will testify and say about you as a parent. You can think of teachers, therapists, people in your neighborhood, people from your church, family members, what they say about you as a parent, right? If you can agree on something, that's always good. Or if there are parts that you have agreed on, that's great. You don't have to agree on everything, but the judge is like, okay, we agree on these 3 things. We can just decide the other 3 things. I already talked about the potentiality of maintaining natural relationships, the preference of the child. That's a hard one. Because the younger the child is, the less the court cares, basically. The older the child, the more likely the court is to give that some weight. But they're not gonna, if a 4-year-old is really close to their mom, they're not gonna really give that much weight. And the court is very good at sort of sniffing out when the child wants to be with a parent, because that's the parent that spoils them, right? They want to know that the reason the child wants to be with them is for reasons other than this is the person that lets me do whatever I want. Okay, so they have all these funny terms for that, like lollipop parenting, the parent who brags them, right? Okay. Material opportunities affecting the future life of the child. There's things like, do you involve your child in, do you find like extracurriculars, do you take your kids to the library, all those kinds of things. Age, health, and sex of the child. It used to be that little kids would always go with their mothers. The presumption was that only moms could take care of little kids. And as kids got older, boys went with their dads and girls went with their moms. And basically people said that makes no sense. And that's based on stereotypes about who men and women are, what kind of their parents there are. We're not allowed to do that anymore because it's ridiculous. But sometimes there may be a reason why age or sex of the child matters with respect to their relationship with one parent or another. Okay. Residences of the parents, opportunity for visitation. Is this a situation where the parents are close enough that they can have a relationship with both parents? Courts want to see a relationship with both parents most of the time. Length of separation for the natural parents. Sometimes people have a time in their life where they're not capable of parenting. That happens to a lot of people. And if you've had a time like that, right? If you were incarcerated, if you needed substance use treatment, if you had a mental health situation where you needed help, you need to explain to the court from your perspective what you did that you thought was right for your child, right? Why you thought, well, obviously, if you're incarcerated, some people always say that that's prior voluntary abandonment. That's not voluntary, and I would argue that it's not. Even though I've heard people say that it is. It's not voluntary. And I think that's the argument that you would make. But for example, I know people who have had a struggle with mental health and said, I really don't think I'm in the best position to parent. The best thing I can do for my child is to drop them off with my mother. And that to me is a good parenting decision. Same if you have a substance use disorder. I'm going to drop my kids off while I take care of myself so that I can be the best parent. That to me is not a weakness, that shows a strength. But you want to, the judge might say, oh, I see you had a substance use disorder. You don't let the judge control. You tell them, no, I actually did a good thing. I made sure that my child was safe. I put them in the best place that I could, right? Think of what the things you did to make some of those perceived weaknesses into strengths. Yeah.
Because when you told me this, he kept hearing from a lot of fathers. So
Yeah.
who were returning citizens coming back to their community and wanting to be involved in their children's lives. And I'm looking at this, and because of so many barriers to reentry, and because of incarceration itself, somebody who really wants to be involved in their child's life, but is struggling to get a job because of their criminal record or having to work long hours because of that, or maybe doesn't have the reputation because people know, people think they know what they did in the past. Like I can see so many of these that would get negatively judged, even though it's a good person who wants to be with their kids and the kid would. So like, I guess, I can see these factors mounting and what should somebody do if they actually fall into a lot of these, not because they're not a good parent, but because of like challenges.
Let me come back to that because I'm gonna get to people coming home.
And also if you can, your voice goes down.
Okay.
So keep it up.
I'm getting too comfortable with chatting with people.
No, that's good. I like it. But when you get
Yeah.
real comfortable, you like
Okay.
and try to repeat a question that somebody asked.
Okay.
So then when you ask a question, repeat the question and then answer it.
Okay. I'll do that when I come back to Elena's question. Okay. So I want to talk about joint custody. Most times a judge will order joint custody because most judges think that it's best for kids to have a relationship with both parents.
What judges and what courtrooms?
Well, I'll tell you, it depends. When you're thinking of joint custody, it may not be what so I'm gonna have to break it down.
Right.
Joint custody does not mean 50-50. Okay, I think people think it does. It just means that there's shared time. And there might be shared decision making. Often there's one parent, well, I'll get to it. So I'll talk about the different kinds of custody. There's physical custody, right? And that is what it sounds like. Who has the child in their care for a time? People call it parenting time as well. And then there's legal custody, and that means the right to make decisions. And it's really major long-term decisions about the child's life, like religion, education, medical care, discipline. Just to be clear, if you have physical custody on Tuesdays, you get to decide what your child eats on Tuesdays, you get to decide what your child does on Tuesdays, when they go to sleep, etc. Unless you have some agreement or there's an order that says the child will go to bed by X time, etc., which sometimes they do. Okay, so as long as you're complying with the order, otherwise you get to make those decisions. You get to decide who's around your children. The other person can't say, oh, I don't like that your boyfriend's there, or you get to decide who's around your child during your parenting time, unless there's an order saying, okay?
Okay, hold on. That's interesting. Okay. Because in our community, when we think of joint custody, we're thinking we go to court, the judge says, when the child is in your care, I'm responsible. When the child is in my care, I'm responsible. And we're thinking we got 50-50 rights, right? So that's not true. When the judge orders joint custody, it's not that we got 50-50 custody, which means that I don't owe her no child support or he don't owe her no child support. That when the child is in my care, I'm responsible for all the financial burdens. And then when the child goes in her care, I'm responsible for all the financial burdens. That's not it.
That's a different question. That's a child support question. Child support is determined by it's literally a math formula. It's determined by the number of nights each child spends. So if they spend 4 nights with you, 3 nights with you, that goes into a calculator. Then your income goes into it. And what that does is it calculates a percentage of the total of what you have, and you each pay a percentage.
But hold on, how did we get to the joint custody? If for instance, I'm trying to get food stamps in TCA, right? And based on my understanding, the only way I can get that TCA and food stamps is I gotta take this man or this woman downtown that's not in the household. Because I got 2 scenarios on here. I have a cousin who's a male who has been a single father for the last 17 years. This child is with him. He don't ask for no custody support, nothing, right? And then the same with the women. So my question though is, I gotta go downtown to get support, social support, food stamps and cash. One of the main questions that they ask is, who is the absent parent? What's their name and contact information so that they can go and get their coin on the back end if they giving you $300 a month and $400 in food stamps. When that happens, the state goes and contacts this man or woman and orders them to support, right? At what stage does the judge issue joint custody, and does the absent parent get to say, hey, Your Honor, I actually want equal custody? What?
I'm getting there.
Okay.
Well, Nicole's right. So even if you don't want to, if you file for public benefits, the state will automatically, almost always, file a child support action against the other parent, because the state's thinking is, why am I paying for this child when there's somebody's out there who's supposed to be paying for it? If the state had any sense, the state would give the parent both the child support and they do that in some states. They would get both the child support and the benefits. We don't do that. The state reimburses itself and pays out the child support. Child support and custody are totally different. It makes no sense. The only way that it comes into play, if you never visit your child, there are many people who say, I don't visit my child, I shouldn't have to pay. Court does not care. If that child has to eat, you have to pay your child support, okay? If you say, I'd like to give up my rights, so I don't have to pay child support, the court will say, absolutely not.
They can't say that.
They can't. They can make a decision. Most times they'll say you can give up your rights and never see that child, but you still have to pay child support because that child's got to eat. Okay, so I want to talk about how we get to joint custody.
Thank you.
Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, a whole bunch of other factors. And what the court is deciding here is the decision where these factors came from says, if the parties can't talk to each other, we absolutely cannot have joint custody. I have seen cases where there's violence, where these people should not speak to each other, and joint legal custody was in there. It blows my mind, but it happens. One thing that if the parties really cannot speak to each other, the courts usually say one person has tie-breaking authority, which I'll get to, but
Like the grandmother or something?
no, one of the parents.
Okay.
But so basically the court wants to know, can these people talk to each other? Are they willing to share custody in some way? And again, not necessarily 50-50.
Right.
We always go back to the fitness of the parents, what the child's relationship is like with each parent. Is it worth splitting this child, back and forth? What is the preference of the child? Is it
Potential disruption of
so
child.
if the child's going back and forth, is the child missing their after school program? Are they going to be late for school? Are they going to miss the church group they're in? Whatever it is that the child does. basketball practice, those kinds of things, right? The court wants the child to have a full life also. Are the parents living close enough that you can actually go back and forth? Is the parent working multiple jobs such that really the child is either at potential for being left home alone or not spending time with the parent anyway?
Right, I think you talk about my life. So what you trying to say, I'm not a good parent because I work next job and
I mean, I'm here right now, my kids are home.
no, it just boggling my
I know.
mind.
Yeah, I know.
All of these physical things can determine if I'm a good father or not. So, or a mother, right? Because what if I don't have all these things? Right? So it's like the parent who's responsible for the child can be like, oh, Your Honor, I have my child in these activities, and all of these things, and then being with him is going to disrupt it, or Your Honor, oh, he lives like 45 minutes away from the school, so it's going to get the child late as if you can't get on the bus an hour early and get the kids to school, or as if people can't drive and get up early enough to get their kids to school. So it's almost like all of these factors go against a person who just getting out of jail, right?
100%.
Living with somebody else and feeling like they don't have all these things to fight. It's like it's not a fair game.
I agree with you, but I just want you to know the rules of the game you're playing, right?
Thank you.
So, because if you go into court with somebody who has a lawyer and you don't, this is what the lawyer is going to be thinking, and you got to
Do
be.
you advise child custody court without a lawyer?
I don't think anyone should ever step foot in a court without a lawyer. That said, it is very, very difficult to get a lawyer. Legal aid right now is what I put resource. They have many openings. Like there's not a lot of lawyers. On top of the fact that it was hard before,
Right.
Many like a public defender's office, legal aid. I just talked to someone at the Women's Law Center. They have a position, a domestic violence position. They've been trying to fill for a year. It's very difficult right now. So there are cases where you can, which I'll talk about at the end, where you can call and get like limited advice.
Yeah.
But again, I put this all in a head because if you can go in and say, listen, these don't apply to me, but they also don't apply to you, right? Because remember, you're against somebody else, right? So in some cases, if we're both working long hours, that is a wash, right? So you got to think against the other person. And it doesn't, it's not about being a bad parent or a good parent, although sometimes it is, and sometimes that's how the court makes it.
Right.
It's about comparing one parent to the other.
Like psychological, so like I don't see that, like I see all these like monetary things.
Right.
It's
What
not
about
what about
the fact that a child grows up without their father?
yeah, or their
Or that
child is going to this, right? Maybe one parent doesn't have all these things, the parent with all these resources and stuff is like psychologically
So
damaged.
I think that's supposed to be number 4, is an issue to establish between the child and the parent. Like, what does that actually look like? And I think, I don't know if you heard this part, Nicole, if you were in the other room, but that you really, this is so fact specific and stuff that seems like silly details to you because it's your life,
Right.
are really painting a picture for a judge of like, no, let me tell you what my relationship is with my child, because nobody knows that besides you. There are things that probably don't.
Yeah. But like, what does a person, the absent parent do who's been parentally alienated for a certain amount of years? Of course, they don't have anything to say that they have offered or can do because
Courts take parental alienation very seriously. I will say it's sort of like a.
how do you frame it then? Because I say
You gotta document. You got every text message, email that you sent trying to see your child.
Right.
Document everything.
Thank you.
Every attempt you've made, every dollar. You know what happens is a lot of people say, this person says I never supported, but actually I dropped off diapers. I
Right.
did things. I did,
Right.
maybe I didn't give $200, but when I had, I gave. And I, if my salary was this,
Yes.
I at least dropped off diapers and formula, or I dropped my kids a winter jacket. Those kinds of things. And people don't think to keep receipts of that stuff, but that's the kind of thing courts want to see.
You've been hearing from some fathers who say like, they're in a bind because they don't have very much money.
Yeah.
And so they either have to pay the child support, which their kids don't know they're doing.
I know, or do something.
Give the money to their kid when they're kids.
That's
Of course. Yeah, no, the child support thing is a it's a whole.
The whole system need to be shut down.
And child support, I think, has been shown to discourage many people who do give this kind of informal support for many reasons, right? Because you have to be the child support or they can enforce against you. That has so many consequences. So you either say, screw it, I'm not doing any of it, and you leave, even though you used to have a relationship with your child, or you say, but I've been doing all that stuff and nobody appreciates that. What's the point?
Right.
Or they don't realize that it's not the mom who filed against them, it was the state because the mom needed her benefits. You know, and that makes it really complicated for people.
But that's another thing too, because it wasn't when I first had my daughter, my oldest daughter in 2021. At that time, the law did not require a woman to take the man downtown if she was getting food stamps and daycare vouchers, right? Many of us young Black girls were under the perception at that time that the man had to go downtown. It took, and I always tell this story, it was one of my white social worker, case manager. And I said, well, I need these daycare vouchers, but I don't want to take my child's father to a good father.
Yeah.
And she said, well, you don't have to. That's what I thought I did. I said, no, all you needed to do was write a letter stating how much the child's father gives you for the care of the child, had him sign it, and that's what you give as income, right? You know what it actually 2001, I'm sorry, 2001. And so that's what I did. And so but I did not know that I could have done that, right?
Yeah.
And what I did is I looked up the law and it said the caveat that allowed for as long as you can show the income, like where you were getting this income from, you were allowed to get daycare vouchers, right? That was a thing. Now,
I never
that's
did that.
look into that because I think
that would help a lot of people.
it would, and I think it's under like I don't know if it's the Maryland Department of Education who runs that daycare voucher component, but it has changed over time. But it used to be a time where all you needed to do was write a letter indicating how much you were getting for the care of your child from the absent parent, and that was enough to get daycare voucher.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, but you know they changed the law, but I'm very interested in.
In the late 90s, there was a lot of the late 90s were just hell for poor people, and every law that came out was bad, right? So it was like, it was like 1996. There was the Personal Worker Responsibility Act that just like went over. It was like this welfare queen nonsense, and they made added more work requirements, drug testing, all this everything, and they had the 97 crime bill, and they had. And the 94 crime bill, and the 1997 was the House by that Up and Safe Family Act that has that 15-month rule.
Yeah, well,
right.
we repealed. Right. Yeah, we repealed Shanta, repealed the ban on food stamps that happened in the war on drugs era, where you had to, if you wanted to get, you know, where the question says if you have a felony, a drug offense, you can't get TCA or cash. That's been repealed. We repealed that in 2018. So social service, no one should, that box should not be on any social service. But I'm sorry, let's move.
All right, we're gonna get there. Okay. All right. The sincerity of the parents request, so that's supposed to get at this, like, are you trying to use this child like as leverage? Or are you really, and you can bring in evidence about how like this person's never shown an interest and all of a sudden they want full custody, like that doesn't make any sense, right? Financial status of the parents, that is exactly what it sounds like. It's as disgusting as it sounds. Impact on state or federal assistance. Would the change in custody affect the one parent's ability to receive their benefits? The court does look at that.
Right.
The benefit to the parents, why is the parent asking for custody? Is there some like legitimate reason?
Because it's their child.
Yeah, right. But is it, for some people, it's like, why, it's the court trying to figure out what's happening.
Why? Yeah.
And then any other factors that you want to bring up, right?
Can you clear up and that, I mean, not an omen, but there's word in our community that even though you birthed the child, you don't have legal custody of that child until you file custody. Is that true?
No.
So,
If you're on the birth certificate, I was just saying, for a mother, if that child comes out of you, you are its mother.
For father, if you're not on the.
But a father, it's different. It could be, if you sign an acknowledgement of paternity, but then you're on the hook for child support, so people need to understand that. If you sign up to be the parent.
so
you
we can make
My little
it. birth
cousin, because he don't know the mother like that, and the child is his. And she acknowledges that, but she's also telling him, I'm gonna destroy you the first chance I get. So he's afraid to be a father.
Yeah.
But this is my little cousin, literally right now. The girl tried to trick another dude for the first, the little girl was 2 years old. So she had another dude on the line for the last couple, but Slim found out it's because as the little girl's getting older, she looking just like my little cousin every day.
Yeah.
And then this is who she was dealing with. So
Now she
Well,
going
now
back to the original, you the baby dad.
well, yeah, now she been contacting my little cousin on Facebook. She sent him a Facebook message. You know, this is after 2 years.
Oh, hold
And
on.
one of
Cool, you had a question.
The question was, well, if you have full custody of your child, you know, since you had your child once you signed a birth certificate, why as soon as you mess up with one situation, the state just come in and grab your child?
That's a whole long conversation. The state has what these like magical powers called parents patriarch, right? This is like this old Latin stuff that says they're the parent of the state. And what that means is they care for people who are vulnerable, including kids, right? So that's what the child welfare system came out of. This idea that if the parents are not doing their job,
Because my mother would come take the child.
Yeah, of course, and of course, instead, right, makes it so right. I was just saying, I'm gonna try to have someone from the public defender's office who does these cases every day come in. You're not wrong, and they only take certain people's children.
I mean,
That's
I'm
like-
doing 18, but it just gave me that
Of course,
PTSD of having another child that you could just come take my child.
of
and
course.
ease.
Of course.
You know, mentally, you're not physically ready for that system that treat you up and spit you out. I was having suicidal thoughts of killing my daughter, whoever had her, and everything, but I knew that wasn't right. So I had to back myself up
Yeah,
to get my thoughts together and get the treatment that I needed.
Yeah.
because I just didn't have one kids come with that situation.
I understand. I mean, I've never experienced that personally, but I've represented people who have been in that situation. It's like, and one of the things I talk about a lot is like, there's no place you can go if you feel like you need help without somebody calling CPS on you.
Yeah.
So if you are struggling and you're like, I need
to.
of course,
Nothing matters.
Nothing added. It's just like they took a young girl from me in the urban community
yeah.
and started family, give my child a family. No one gave me a second.
And if it's a baby, right, from their perspective, easier to get that kid adopted now
Then later.
than later, because if the older kids get, the harder it is to get them out of the
So
system.
you know what this meant my doing? This year, February, on her 18th birthday, because my nephew was in her but just like, oh, ain't that she doing? I mean, we tight as glue now, but it's taking a minute.
I'm sorry.
But her parents will think that if you got this on my child, you'll let them know that they adopted. You knew I was coming from. I was gonna hire a private investigator on her 18th birthday anyway.
Yeah.
Well, let me, because I ain't gonna lie, I don't mean no disrespect, but like, I wanna ask, I want the practical advice, should I advise this man?
We not
I really-
giving, she's not giving legal advice. But what is you saying? What you should
Should
advise?
he sign paperwork?
He should get actually
Yeah, I'm too late to get him on this.
We got slides, get him
I think
educated.
before anybody establishes that they're a parent, you want them to understand what that means. It means they're on the hook for child support for the rest until this child is 18. So it's not,
But it's bigger than child support.
It is.
Like having, like, being a parent is bigger than
of course,
money every month.
but not everybody sees it that way.
Yeah,
And I think when sometimes people sign the papers out of spite and then are like, oh, I didn't realize I'm now on the hook for X amount of dollars till the
yeah,
child
but
is
it's like.
18. Or some people just want an informal relationship.
Yeah.
They're fine not being on a birth certificate. They just want to see the child every couple months or something. And maybe that other person will get an access. It really depends. And you got to know people's people have different goals in their relationships with their kids.
Yeah.
And it's not for me to decide what your relationship with your kids should be. If somebody tells me what they want, I can tell you like what the different routes are to get there and what I see as the pros and cons. But I'll never tell you what you should do with your life. I don't know what your life is, you know?
Yeah.
Experts doing, when they're asking related to the bias that we all know is in the system, are the
Right.
courts actually tracking that? Racial bias or even disability bias as well, records, like, any mental health bias, like.
The domestic
those biases exist, but like,
The
they track that?
protective orders. The court that was doing the circuit court, the district court for Baltimore City did a study of like. They polled respondents of like, they polled people to see how they felt they were treated. And like how satisfied they were, like a couple of years ago. It was just based on people's responses. That's the only thing that I've seen. I'm sure I hope there's more recent stuff, but I mean, it's what you would expect. White people felt more satisfied, Black people felt less satisfied. People felt that they experienced racism. I mean, I don't have to tell you, you've all sat in the courtroom. It's pretty evident. And you know, I have people tell me, oh, the child welfare system is not racist. And I'm like, sir, have you ever sat in a courtroom? Sit in a courtroom and then tell me it's not racist. You cannot hand me any piece of paper written by anyone in the world that tells me it's not racist because I have sat in many of them. And there's no way.
Is there any, like, among these judges that you're around?
They are, but it's like people can't get out of their own. You know, I don't know.
It's a systemic system.
Yes.
Believes
And
it,
people-
and it's to the core. So when you have something in your core, it's almost impossible to change it without cutting out the core.
Yeah.
And nobody has the heart and the desire and the motivation and the financial backing to cut to the core of this systemic racist system. Because that's what it is. That's all through this is the judicial system. There is no justice for certain brown people, period, all across the board. And it's the reports, the studies have been
Yeah.
proven, you know,
It's not that people
person
don't know.
arrested for the same crime, same amount of drugs, will do a lot more time if they are from suburbs.
All right, I'm gonna move through this and then I'll take more questions, okay?
Yes.
So when we're talking about joint custody, this goes to Nicole's question about like, what is joint custody? You can have one person who has physical custody and both parents have legal custody. You can have one person that has legal custody and both parents have physical custody. You can have shared legal custody. You can both have shared, there's all the different ways that this can work together. So when you say joint custody, it can mean a lot of different things. I think people just assume it means 50-50. It does not. Joint custody could mean I have my kids during the week and my ex has the kids on the weekend. It could mean that I have my kids during the school year and my ex has them every break because they live in another state. It could mean that I have my kids Monday through Thursday and my ex has them Friday through Monday again. You know, like there's a lot of different ways this could work. And in terms of legal custody, it could mean we both make decisions, big decisions together always, or it means I always make the big decisions. It could even mean I make all big decisions, except you know what? You don't really care. I don't really care about church, but you do. So the judge will give decision making about religion to you. There could be carve outs even like that, like, or, you know, you really care about the kids' education. You're the one who always goes to school things. You're going to make the decisions about it. It can even be carved up like that. Okay. One parent might have what's called tie breaking authority. So if you have joint legal custody and you disagree, you're going to have to make a decision somehow. Tie breaking authority does not mean I have tie breaking authority, I always win, or else that's pointless, right? It means you have to have a really good faith effort. You have to try really hard. You might even have to go to mediation to try to figure it out. You have to demonstrate you really gave it a go to try to get to an agreement, right? All right.
Yeah.
Now, there's a newish rule that says you have every case that goes to court, you have to that involves custody, you have to submit a parenting plan. It's a document that you can get on the court website or at the courthouse, where it basically asks you to work with the other person to figure out what this child's life is gonna look like. And these are the kinds of things that the court is looking at, right? And it has all these guidelines. But it's literally asking you, like, where is the child spending their birthday? Where is the child sleeping on Sundays? Who is allowed to visit? Are you allowed to swim? You know, like thinking through what it looks like. I have many people say, I would really like my kids 2 nights during the week, but actually I work weeknights. And when you have to think about, like, how, I'm saying I want it in the moment, but does this actually work for my life? What is it going to be like in reality when I have all this custody, but I can't actually do it because I also need to work, or I have other obligations, or I have other children, or, you know, whatever is going on in your life, right? So you want to really, and it also talks about how you make major decisions about custody. So the goal is that you work on these things together and show up in court with it, so the judge makes less decisions. Because let me tell you, I tell everybody, settle whatever you can, because you do not want a judge deciding what is best for you in any circumstance. If you have a child in front of you and you're basically equal parents, the judge will basically give you 50-50, even if that's not realistic for you. Or the judge may not take things into account that are important to you because they don't know what's important to you if you haven't told them, right? So you might, you know, the court will say things, think about this. If you're having trouble coming to an agreement, the court can, you can request things like co-parenting classes, mediation. There's what's called a custody evaluation, which is where somebody comes and talks to each parent and the child in some situations and writes a report, which goes to the court. That is dicey, you know, because often the court just does whatever the evaluator says, and the evaluation is only as good as the evaluator. So it depends. Some of these services are free. Sometimes you get stuck with the bill. So it really depends. You want to make sure you ask that question. The court can order you to do one of these things, and then you still have to pay for it. You just want to really think about, you know, people always think, okay, the holidays that are most important are my child's birthday, Thanksgiving, Christmas. And I once met a client who said the only holiday she wanted was 4th of July. Because 4th of July is when her entire family gets together and she wanted her children there. I would never have thought to ask for 4th of July for her. You know, but we went through each, I mean, we saw the calendar, we're like, how do you feel about Veterans Day? How do you feel about President's Day? You know, like, do you, for Labor Day, do you do something with your family? Is there something that's important or meaningful? If you have 2 parents that are moms, who gets Mother's Day? You know, who gets the child's birthday? Do you want the child on your birthday? You know, that kind of detail, because once that order is in effect, that's the order, right? And you can, I'll talk about modifications. Okay, next one. So if you want to modify a custody order that already exists, you have to file a motion to modify, and there's a form you can file out the courthouse. You have to show that there's a material change in circumstances since the entry of the original order. And what that means is something happened since the last time you were in court that really changes things. It can't be something you knew then and forgot to tell the judge. It has to be some new information. Okay. And then the court also has to decide that what you're asking for is going to be in the child's best interest. So it could be something like you, if the other person is in a new relationship and you think that that person is not good for your child, that might be enough. If you, if the other parent did something put the child in danger, you might want to raise that. If the other parent's work schedule has changed and actually they're not spending any time with the child at all, you might want to raise that. You don't always know what is going to be a material change in circumstances.
And somebody who tried to do this because the other parent was making some really scary medical decisions or medical neglect. And the judge recently told them that they couldn't get their, it wasn't a material change until the child really showed them. Wow. So here this person in the court saying like, this is going to be a problem. There's data that said this is going to be a problem. Like, and the judge was like, well, it's too early to tell, even though like it very clearly was dangerous.
I mean, that's really hard. I mean, it's hard to know without knowing what the facts are, but unfortunately, a lot of, if you want to get a protective order and you're like, this person keeps starting me, sometimes the judge will say, well, nothing actually happened. So, you know, and you're like, so you need to wait until I have a black eye. And it's like, sort of, yeah. It's really not, it's okay. I know. So if there is an existing custody order, so for example, if you were away and you come back and there's a custody order and you want to say, no, I deserve time with my child. Release from prison or parole could be a material change of circumstance. If you've completed programs, that could be material change of circumstance. If you completed substance use treatment, if you got a new job, if all of these things, particularly if there are multiple of these things together, if you moved, if one of the things that came up in custody was that you lived in a place that everybody felt was unsafe and there's some change in your life that you think warrants you having more custody of your child. If you've been having more custody with your child, and you can show that you've been having more than what the previous order was, you might be able to say, we need to modify this order to reflect what's actually happening. Because even though this order is in place, I've actually had the kid more than 50% of the time, and I want an order that says that I get that always, because I don't want that person to change their mind. And then I have to.
Could this come up where
People try a lot. The judges do not like changing the orders. They like kids to have stability. They also don't want to be people running in and out of court for everything. So you want to have as good of a case as you can.
is it a set number like you get the?
No. There's no set number. Okay, relocation. This is a lot of data. The basic thing is that if you want to move out of state or the other person wants to move out of state, that is automatically a material change in circumstance. You can file for that. The other person, if the person wants to move with the child, has to notify within 90 days notice before they want to move. Okay, and if they don't do that, the court can take that into account when deciding whether or not to change. Louder.
Can I just add, I want to do a quick check-in reminder. Please pay attention to the things that she's saying, because you will get an opportunity to win a gift card of $25, right? That is correct. Yeah, so like pay attention to some of the points that she's making,
All right.
both in the earlier part of the day and now.
Okay, so everything I was talking about, with the exception of a modification, deals with a parent against a parent. Okay, those are people who have equal rights to their child. Now I'm going to talk about what's called third-party custody. Okay, third-party custody is when one person who wants custody is not a parent, grandparent, step-parent, cousin, whoever believes that they are in a position of a parent and wants some sort of access to the child. Okay. For a third party, a non-parent, to get access to a child, they have to prove that they are what's called a de facto parent, or there are exceptional circumstances, or that the parent is unfit to custody. Okay. If there's only one legal parent, sorry, I think that is, this is the old slide deck. It's fine. We'll get to that. If there's only one legal parent, what you have to show, what the other person has to show, is that the parent who's there. So this most often comes up if you are, if for example, you're the dad and you have custody of your child, and then you have a relationship with someone, and that person forms a bond with your child. And then you guys break up, and that person says, wait, no, I raised those kids for 4 years. You're not going to tell me I don't have rights to that child. That person can assert that they're a de facto parent. And
Say
what
that again?
they can say they can say that they're a de facto parent. And what they have to prove is that the other person, the dad, consented to, they agreed that this relationship was good, right? They fostered, they made sure that these people, they wanted this relationship, right?
But what if the person passed away? What if the person that could prove that died? Because we had a situation where two people, a grandmother was taking care of his, this girl, right?
Yeah.
And the grandmother has custody and all of that. And the grandmother passed away. And so the de facto parent was the aunt, right? And the aunt had taken care of this child for the last 3 or 4 years. And all of a sudden, the natural born parent, because the grandmother is gone, is now saying, oh, I want custody of child, the grandmother, the deceased person actually.
So they should go do exceptional circumstances, but let me talk about that in a second. Okay, so if you want to prove that you're a de facto parent, you have to show that the other parent, that the actual parent right? So in this scenario, the girlfriend is telling the dad that you made this relationship happen, right? You wanted me to have this relationship with your child. That person lived with the child. They acted like a parent, took care of the child, contributed financially, paid for things without expecting me to pay them back, like acted like a parent would. And they have a bond. If you can prove that, you may be able to say that I'm a de facto parent. So I get rights to visit with and be with this child, even though you don't have a biological connection. That's if there's one parent. If there are two parents, so two people break up and one of them gets into a relationship with someone else, and then that third party says, I want to be a de facto parent, but there's two biological parents in the picture. They have to prove that both parents consented to the relationship between the child and the step parent or the other parent. And that consent can be either expressed like, yes, I am fine with you acting like a parent with my child. I like it, it's good. Or they can show what's called implied consent, which basically says you didn't object. You let me act like a parent to your child. You let me discipline them. You let me do all the things that you should have been doing. So you can't now come and say that you didn't consent. You knew that they were calling me mom and calling you mama or whatever, and you didn't stop that. Yes. Well, some people end up.
Can you please repeat the question that they asked?
So that's fine. The question was, why would somebody want to be a de facto parent in a situation like that? What's the benefit? So that usually comes up in a situation where one parent is aware, there's two biological parents, one parent maybe takes a lesser role, and that the other parent forms a romantic relationship with someone else, and that person forms a bond or is attached to the kids, and then is no longer allowed to see them, and is upset by that and wants to continue the relationship, and many times thinks it's bad for the kids to not have a relationship with them because of their close relationship or because they've been acting like a parent, and all of a sudden they're totally cut off.
So the court will assign someone that title of de facto parent, the two parents are living, and one of them is, I guess you say like, you know, I guess they fell back or whatever, or like.
If they can prove that both parents consented, but then they have to meet all the other criteria too. They had to have lived together. The other parent had to like act like a parent, and there has to be a bond between the parent and the child.
That's kind of common.
Yeah, well, it's not common that both parents consent. That's the hard part.
Right.
So, and that's exactly what happened, is that there was a case where one parent consented, but there were only two parents. It was a same-sex couple. So they decided to have kids together, and then the person who birthed the child said, no, you're not a parent. So then they established this test. But when there's two parents, they don't want people getting in multiple relationships, and then each one of those people has a claim to these kids as a parent. So both parents therefore have to say, no, I'm okay with this relationship and you acting like a parent. It's harder than it sounds to prove. Okay, if you cannot prove a de facto parent, you want to prove exceptional circumstances. Exceptional circumstances is another one with all these factors. Okay, and if you're a grandparent, for example, so like in the situation where Nicole just described, where the aunt stepped in and she'd actually been taking care of the kids, and the biological parent did not, they could go into court and say, no, I want to assert that I am a third, that I deserve custody, because look at the length of time the parent has been away from the child. Look at the time that person, I've been raising this child since they were 2 and now they're 8. If this child, number 3, if this child left my care, they'd be devastated. I'm the only parent they know. You know, the parent's been gone for 6 years and all of a sudden they want custody, right? Look at the relationship that I have with the child versus the parent's relationship with the child. They'll also look at the parent, like, why is the parent coming back now, right? So if you're the parent trying to reestablish a relationship, why are you coming back now? And how genuine is your desire to have that relationship with your child and why?
See, because that was exactly the question that I was thinking about, like,
This happens a lot.
yeah, that's the question I was thinking about, with like the natural parent of the child that may, for whatever reason, you know what I'm saying, might not be close to the child, and then, you know, maybe he just becomes more mature, you know what I'm saying, like, how does he now step in and challenge somebody that is not the boy father?
Well, if there's no custody order, you file for custody, right? And you say, I deserve custody, I'm the biological parent. And then the other person actually has to show why they deserve custody if they're not a parent. They have to show one of these things, right? Because they don't naturally, the court doesn't naturally assume that you get to be a parent, right? If you're not, you have to prove something that gives you a reason to even be there in the first place, right? So as a parent, you still have more rights, whether or not it will go your way.
But does he have to sign to get that? I mean, is it enough for him to just walk in there and say, everybody agrees, but he's gonna have to sign something to claim the child?
So the question is, if a person hasn't been involved and then a third party has been raising the child and now the parent wants to step forward, how do they do that, right? So the parent should file for custody. If they're not declared legally the parent because there's no people, they were not married, there's no affidavit of parentage, there's nobody on they're not on the birth certificate, there's no DNA. No, you'll have to do something to establish that you're the parent first before you can file for custody. And then once you're established that you're the parent, you're on the hook for child support, but you also now have more rights than anyone else. And the other person to have custody will have to say that they have that there are exceptional circumstances, that you are unfit, or that they are de facto parent. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on disability.
Yeah.
And child support loaded, I'm on disability. I know I can't. And the mother still in that, let me see my face. What legend do I take after that? Because the one when she gonna say I was on child support and I had been paying child support, but at the same time, if I can't work because I'm on disability, how am I supposed to pay child support? With the judge allow me to grant custody or with the judge? Custody of the judge?
I never, there's no way to know what a judge will do. But the fact that you are not working because you're on disability should make sense to a judge, right? That's what disability is. And child support and custody are different. In the same way that you can't say, I don't want to see the child, so I don't want to have to pay. The court shouldn't be able to say to you, if you are the legal father, right, that you don't get to visit your child because you haven't paid child support. Those are supposed to be different. Whether or not judges do that in practice, not always, but you should say that these are separate and my relationship with my child goes based on the factors of what's in the best interest, not based on child support. Child support is a different determination. It's a totally different law.
I have to say this because once a person exposes themselves to child support, it's over.
Yeah,
You're a fraud.
I understand that.
That's what I'm saying to him. Like, you want the baby, but you're a fraud, brother. You're gonna have to sign something and expose yourself to her. And she's telling you, I'm gonna crush you with child support. She's telling you that to your face. You're gonna have to sign that paper.
So, like I said, the thing about child support is it's math. There's a federal law that basically says you have to follow this calculator. There's a calculator online where if you put in both people's income, and it tells you this in little boxes, you can Google Maryland child support calculator, each person's income and how many nights each parent spends. If one person pays for the insurance or daycare, it takes that into account too, and it spits out a number, and that is the number. It's really hard to get anything higher or lower than that number. Because it's very easy for a judge to say the computer said this is the number, and this is the.
Is it all common for judges just kind of like, I know you said you can't tell that every single judge does, but have you noticed any patterns of like judges kind of informally holding us against?
Yes.
Like if they can't pay child support, but they have a really good relationship with their child, does the judge end up like referring like, oh, you didn't pay your child support? So
Yes. Judges are biased about all kinds of things. And I think at that point, it's a good opportunity to say, I'm not in a financial position to pay child support, but let me tell you the other things that I do. The question was, if you, I said before that judges are not, the visitation and child support are supposed to be different. And Elena asked whether I have seen judges hold a failure to pay child support against a parent. And I think, of course, yes, because judges don't want to see that. But there's completely different factors from by which a judge is supposed to decide what is in the best interest of the child, and money is only one factor. And it is useful to remind a judge of that, put that on the record. And the record is, the transcript there's a recording every time you're in court, right? And to say that's a different thing. And also to say, maybe I didn't pay the child support because I didn't have cash, but I work at a restaurant and I drop food off. Or I'm a good, whatever, I take care of the child, I do all these other things. Okay. Almost done. The
You
other,
come back?
sure, anytime. I have like 2 more minutes. The other thing, if you can't prove exceptional circumstances, you can prove that a parent is unfit. These are the things that a court looks at. It's sort of more of the same, but it's the kinds of things you would think of. And if someone is accusing you of being unfit, you want to think about, all right, they said that I renunciated my duties, which means I just like stepped back and I wasn't a good parent. But actually what happened is that they pushed me out. That's where you raise that. When they say, no, you gave up your duties. No, you did not let me, and let me show you how I tried. Okay. All right. If you want to file for custody, go to the circuit court in the county where either parent lives or where the child lives. There's forms there. There's clerks that will help you. There's also often an office staffed by lawyers who can help you fill out the paperwork. You file a petition for custody. It's a $165 fee. If you don't have that kind of cash right now, there's a form you can fill out that asks the court to waive that fee.
It's called a waiver.
Yeah, it's a waiver. If somebody files custody, you get a custody complaint in the mail, or somebody serves it to you by hand. You have 30 days to respond to that. Okay?
Don't just let it sit there.
Do not
Like,
let
I
it
gotta
sit there,
go to
because
court.
they will, yes, don't wait till you go to court. You have to respond to that paper. They can decide custody without you. You want to respond to that paper, and you want to show up in court anytime they tell you to go to court.
So if you get a letter about custody from the other party,
Yeah,
take that, you gotta go to them.
you
No,
got
of
it.
course you gotta go, because if you don't go, then the only person there is the
Yep.
person that filed it.
And the judge will believe everything they say.
That. However, is it like criminal court where it's like the first proceeding, second proceeding, or when you go to court based on this complaint, everything happens that day?
No.
Okay.
So there's usually an initial hearing, or initial court proceeding where the judge finds out who everybody is. If there's lawyers involved, what's going on, they set a schedule. Then there's a settlement conference, and that's when you're supposed to come back with that parenting plan, where you're supposed to try to work everything out yourself. Then, if you can't settle, there's a hearing.
You got a question?
Give me 1 second. I'm almost totally done, and then we can do all the questions. In Baltimore City, a lot of the times it goes in front of a magistrate, not a judge. If you don't like the magistrate's decision, you can file what's called exceptions.
A what?
Exceptions.
Well, that's not an appeal.
It's not an appeal because they're not a judge.
Okay.
What you're asking is for a judge to look at the magistrate's decision and decide whether it was right. You can't just say you didn't like it. You have to say specifically what they did wrong, and then the judge will look at it and decide whether they actually did it wrong.
So that's a file. So you have to file a thing called
Exceptions.
exception. So
Yes.
once you leave court and you don't like the magistrate, so when you go to the initial hearing, you are not in front of a judge who is a lawyer that then became a judge. You're in front of like a civilian.
They're often lawyers.
They are
But not always. Yeah, not always with some, yeah. So in Baltimore City, there's like 2 magistrates that handle most of it. They for the most part know.
But are they attorneys?
Yeah, I'm pretty
Okay.
sure they are.
Okay,
Yeah.
but not all magistrates are attorneys.
No,
Okay, so
I don't
like,
like.
so, we wanna know that.
Yeah, I'm gonna find that for you.
Um,
It varies by state.
right, but if we know commissioners
Yeah.
are not
No,
lawyers,
yeah.
but they determine if you stay in jail or
Yeah,
not, right?
yeah.
So, brother, did she ask me a question, or did you have a different question?
Go
You
for it.
asked it.
Okay,
See, no.
You don't have to say that.
This is why I say, ask the question,
Yeah.
wow, because you can forget.
Yeah, go for it.
Please ask that question.
Okay, so if I go to court, right? Or say if I get a summons at my old address, but I don't know that I got that summons to go to child support court.
Mhm.
And I went down like 2 months later to try to figure out what was going on. And they said I had missed a court date. But they never reissued me another court date.
What can he do?
But,
What do we do
like,
in that situation? He
Usually you
didn't
can
get
file something, if you can prove that that was not your address and you never had notice of this court date, you should be able to reopen your case.
how?
You have to file a motion. I don't know what it's called. It's probably called a motion for reconsideration. I'm not sure, but I'm gonna give you some resources. These hotlines and explain to them which court, what the date was, what kind of case. And they'll tell you what the form is to fill out. Or if you tell me, I printed out handouts. I did, yeah, I did a whole bunch of handouts. Yeah, so you guys have them. With all that information and figure it out. Because if you, the whole point of a summons is for them to tell you where to go, right? So if you were not living at that address, the point is that no court proceeding is supposed to happen without notice, right? And that summons is supposed to give you notice. If we went to the wrong address, it did not give you notice. So you should be able to file something.
Right, but what if he was homeless? He don't have no address to
Yeah.
show that he was not there, like, then what?
You could just say you didn't live at that address.
Right.
That you need to just show, you could, if you were, you could just say, this is not my address. This is the date that I left that address, and you just swear to it. Right, that's the best you can do. Or if you have any documents to support emails, texts, anything, you could say, look, I did not live at that address since X date, and this summons says it was on Y date and I wasn't there.
Child support even know that I'm on disability. They still want me to pay child support. But how am I supposed to pay? Like if I'm not working and I'm on disability. Like
They're
all
not
my
supposed to be
bills
able to.
on a fixed income.
They're really not supposed to take child support out of disability. It doesn't count as income.
They don't,
It doesn't come out, that doesn't count as income in the statute.
But he still would have that.
an arrearage.
Yeah.
He still has
So
an arrearage.
so, yeah,
And still
there's always a minimum, there's
But that's
always,
why that's important, her here, so that you can educate yourself, because the education is the tool. And so we have slides, we have fact sheets, she'll be coming back. Stay in the loop with us, because this is why we're here. So that we can equip you with the information, so that you can use the information to fight for your right, and fight for access to your children, right? Because if you want access to your children, I promise you, brother, you stick around here, you get access to your children. Yeah, so, yeah.
well, the only thing I was gonna say is if someone filed against you, you can also file against them, file your own complaint and state the facts the way that you see them, because somebody else has written it the way that they see them. If your child is out of state, the rules are really different. And also, if you want custody here, it's very complicated, so you probably need a lawyer. Like even for you to do off the top of my head, I'm like, there's like, it's a lot of rules. And then these are the free resources. A lot of places will do, even if they can't represent you in court, might help you fill out the paperwork so you do it right, or can just tell you like, no, that's the wrong court, don't go to that court, go to, can save you some time at least. Even if they can't stand up with you in court, they might help you think through like, okay, well, these are the facts of your case, this is what you want to do, and this is what you want to argue, so you can at least prepare yourself. So you're not going into totally.
And that's helpful, so when
Yeah.
when you're making these phone calls, have a paper and pen, right? So that you can, or have somebody having a paper and pen with you.
And I don't know if after COVID, if they're back open, but there used to be in the circuit court in Baltimore City. It would be staffed by an attorney every day for a couple hours. You would go in and ask questions. You could take in your paperwork and say, is this the right form? Did I do it right? Because if you mess it up, they send it back to you, And you could work with someone just to do the paperwork right.
Yeah, but I even know the room number where it is, and it's in the basement. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
They don't know. Some people don't care.
So try the family law hotline. And I will tell you, I know the person that runs the legal aid family law intake, he's my former student. He's a very good guy. I know that he stays on the phone with people for hours if he can.
Family law,
You wanna call the legal aid intake.
I got a question.
Yeah,
My daughter, not too long ago, filed with, child support to, so she get some help with her son. And she got his phone, got the whole ID picture and social security number and everything. They told her that they couldn't find him but he is in another state. But they told her that they couldn't find him and close the case. They couldn't find the father. They couldn't find him.
So I know what some folks have done is.
Went to the city.
No, they would get somebody to serve person.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? So like they will go, they would identify, like he's in DC. It is definitely out of pocket, but you could get somebody to pull up on it.
you can
And
have,
be like, Kenneth, you served.
yeah, they're called, you can Google process server in the state. They're not cheap. They're very expensive. You know someone in the state, most states, anyone can.
No,
do
we
it.
have served.
Yeah.
We had one of our associate attorneys on the line. Yeah, we gotta serve, don't we? What's his name? Bobby Burke. Bobby Burke is served.
Oh, really?
Okay? Yeah. And the private investor.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So those are services though that members get access to. So I'm just saying, we gotta access, you know what I'm saying? And your wife will be, she had her second thing, so she. Yeah, what you mean is that ethical? You mean is that legal? It's legal to get somebody to serve somebody a court notice. That's definitely legal.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Because it's actually to preserve that person's right. If there's a court proceeding involving your child in another state, you want to know about it and make a decision about whether you want to participate or not. You also want to be able to say, no, it should be in this state, which is your right. You could say, no, I live in Arizona, it should be in Arizona.
Right.
That's the complicated part, but you want to know that somebody filed in Maryland.
Right.
But this is what I do know, I like in the city of Baltimore anyway, because we were gonna have him serve with like just regularly, but you gotta pay for that. Kirk said that you can't just get anybody to do it. It has to be a family member that actually knows the person. Is what they told us. So her cousin went and served her baby father the divorce.
You just gotta fill out an affidavit saying like, you gotta put in the person's description, and if it matches the person's description.
Yeah.
That's it. But anybody, I don't remember the rule off the top of my head, I think it's anyone over 18.
We just don't have to. Because at first she got her sister.
18 or older, not involved in the case.
18 and older, not involved in the case. Oh, all right. Cool.
Okay. So, so what we're gonna do thank you all. I know we are at 8:14. We often go over a little bit, we started a little late, but I want to thank you for coming by. Thank you for engaging in this very advanced process. Thank you all for coming and asking questions. Keep coming back. It works if you work it, right? Same thing. It does. It works if you work it.